Lunchtime Live with Andrea Gilligan
Brought to you by Active Iron.
on News Talk.
Would you say you have good handwriting? I know my own has deteriorated pretty significantly, actually. It's something I remarked in just over recent years. It's just deteriorated quite a lot. And I was reading this survey today, or it's research, a study by the Norwegian University of Science and Technology. Scientists there have discovered that handwriting trumps typewriting as a boost for the brain. Basically, typing a key on the keyboard requires so much less brain power than actually forming the shape of that letter by hand with a pen. And I'm interested today to chat to people about whether or not we've just lost the key skills that we need when it comes to literally putting pen to paper. Vanessa Fox O'Loughlin from writing.ie is with us today on the line. Vanessa, have we lost the art of handwriting?
I think that's a really interesting question. I think there's sort of two parts to the answer. Probably yes, I think we have lost it to a certain extent because everybody's using keyboards. But I think there's also a question over whether that handwriting needs to be good or not. I'm a writer. I write as Sam Blake, so I write crime. And I find that there is a complete difference between writing something, so I do all my plotting and my sort of working out what way the story's going to go, by hand on a piece of paper, but when I come to write the book, I'm very much typing it. It's a different type of flow, and there's two really different processes in there, so I completely agree with these guys. Obviously, they've done the scientific research. I only have the sort of topical research, but my brain behaves differently when I'm writing something on a piece of paper, and I absorb information differently, and I remember it much better. So if I'm taking notes in a meeting, I'll sit down and I'll write them down, and I will remember those notes much more easily than I will do if I've typed them. But when I'm creating and I'm actually needing to write a book and obviously knit up lots of words, then I have to type. I can't. My handwriting is terrible, I have to admit.
Yeah, you're right. I'm the same. You know, I'm pretty old-fashioned in the sense that I still would print out my briefs every day. You know, when we're in here in the show, and I'm actually looking now at like my own pages here in briefs, and I would always take my own handwritten notes, and I'd write out questions and ideas or prompts or things that I want to mention when we're chatting. Even this conversation and the last one and the previous one and the next one. But I couldn't give this piece of paper, Vanessa, to anybody else. I couldn't make it out. Sometimes I even have to stop and look at it. And what am I after writing there? It's terrible.
I suppose that's the thing, isn't it? It's a case of what's the handwriting for? If it's for you and it's a mental prompt, and I think absolutely 1,000,000% when you're writing something down, it's stored in your subconscious in a different way, so that you maybe you're thinking about it and you're processing the information, and you may never need to look back at the marks you've made on your notes because you've made that note and it's gone into your head in a different way to if you would have typed it. But if you need to pass it on to somebody, that's a whole different story.
No, not a chance.
Yeah, and that's when good handwriting really does become important.
Liz is with us too, Vanessa. Liz McGuire is the creator of Flea Market Love Letters. Do you think are we losing or have we lost the skill of good handwriting, Liz?
Well, thanks very much for having me on. I love to talk all things letters and handwriting, so this is a delight. With regards to handwriting being lost, I think it's more of an accessibility issue. So I don't decide that a letter is a letter if it's pen and paper. I think that if someone is more comfortable writing on a keypad, then they're more comfortable writing on the keypad as long as the writing gets done. But I think that there's lots to be said about the connection that handwriting gives us, particularly in letter writing between one another. I oftentimes, I have several pen pals, and I'll start one letter and my handwriting looks a certain way, and by the end of a stack of letters, my hand might have gotten tired or I might have switched pens, and it looks like two different people wrote the letters because it's just the way my hand goes. Yeah. But that's the novelty of it.
When you think back, like when I think back to school and a primary school level, I actually don't know. I should have maybe asked this earlier today in primary school. Like, I remember in the early days of maybe second, third, fourth class, there was nearly a session a couple of times a week. You had, it was first class actually, it was the area of Holy Communion. You had like calligraphy classes. Like that would be part of the day. You had a special copybook with the lines in it and, the good pen and the ink pen, and you would actually spend time learning, how to write properly.
Well, I'm nodding away here like I can think that you can see me, but I'm agreeing because I remember I was probably, my nieces and nephew are much, much younger than me, but I don't think they're having penmanship classes. But I remember having the notebook about practicing your handwriting. And there's actually a whole study of handwriting called graphology, which is really, really interesting. It has a lot to do with psychology and sort of the slant that a letter has on the page and the pressure and the slope and all sorts of things. But I interviewed a graphologist for my project, which is Flea Market Love Letters. It's an archive of digital love letters. I've got thousands of letters in the archive. I've featured over 600 on my website. But I interviewed a graphologist for it, and she actually said that it's easier to analyze contemporary handwriting because we aren't all writing from a boilerplate, whereas older handwriting, when you go back, into the 1900s, everybody was learning to write from a template. So the handwriting, for graphology's sake, is much easier to analyze in 2024 than it would be 100 years ago.
Listeners in her 60s, I've always been so embarrassed by my poor writing. Sometimes I end up actually scrapping greeting cards and buying more because I make such a mess. I work in finance and function normally in most things. I wonder, is there any help out there for me or classes that I could avail of?
So I think that there's definitely something to be said about practice just at home. And that's where I think that letter writing is a great exercise. There's journaling and there's letter writing. And oftentimes I find, I slow down when I'm writing a letter to someone because I'm thinking, have I made this word clear, or have I kind of, completed my thought? So I think that there's definitely exercises at home that you can do to refine your handwriting. But I also think that handwriting is like a fingerprint. So, if you've got chicken scratch, you've got chicken scratch. But if you're chicken scratch, so own it.
My daughter started her Leaving Cert Paper 1 English, says this listener, and she commented that she had to write for 3 hours. It did make me think, what will my first year son, who the school has now introduced iPads for this year, what will he do when it comes to writing for 3 hours when it's his turn to take the state exams? It's a good question.
God bless his. No, I think it's a real challenge because I think, it's a stamina exercise, and it does have to do with muscles and using your hands differently. So I really do feel, unless there's a decision made about how it can be kind of brought forward to do a hybrid model, I really do feel it's important to ask, where will it go? Joyce
is on the line as well, Liz. Joyce, you work with parents and children. Like, do you notice now that we struggle with writing?
Yes, I do. I've been working with children for 20 years with a program called Fast Forward. And so I ask parents, a battery of questions when they contact us, or teachers as well, about, what children's learning skills are like, their listening, their reading, but also their writing. And when I started working with the program 20 years ago, I would say 1 in 10 children had a problem with writing. I would say now, in recent years, it's 7 or 8 in 10 are struggling with writing.
It's that much of a jump, Joyce.
Yeah, it really is. And there are two sides to writing, in my opinion. There's the cognitive side, but then there's a physical side. And the cognitive side means that, we have to process our thoughts, we have to sequence them, we have to structure our sentences with a beginning, middle, and an end. And we have to think of the spellings and the grammar and the punctuation, and then, write the story as well. So there's a lot going on cognitively. So if a child is struggling cognitively, we have to work on building up those cognitive skills to enable them to access writing more effectively. But then there's the physical side that seems to be becoming a bigger and bigger issue. Children's pencil grip, for example, isn't as good as it used to be. It's weaker, or they don't have the pincer movement. They're not holding their pencils properly. They're leaning too heavily on the page, and that puts pressure on the muscles in the hands and the arms and the chest and the back. They're slower and they get tired, and so writing for some people becomes a real hassle. And Liz just mentioned there, or you mentioned a text there that you received, that someone's daughter was writing for 3 hours in the Leaving Cert. Yeah. Now, to finish an exam on time, we need about 22, 23 words correct per minute. And that's a lot of words. And a lot of our kids are not getting anywhere near that speed in writing. And also someone else mentioned that it's a lack of practice, that, we need to practice the writing. And children...
But just for the speed of it, Joyce, to actually get through the exams in 2 in a day nearly. Exactly.
And also, a lot more kids are printing now. When you with cursive writing, your hand is on the page, your hand flows from one letter to the next letter, and so you can build speed with cursive writing.
Yeah.
And more kids are printing. But also I just wanted to say that more kids too in school are using workbooks for homework and not writing. Before, when I was a child, you'd be asked a question and then you'd have to write the first.
Okay. I just want to mention, I did ask the question about the handwriting classes in school. Sinead in Cork says, yes, Andrea, children in primary school, they do penmanship or handwriting from junior to 6th class in primary school still. Una's on the line. Una, do you still write or send letters?
Yes, I do. I'm a passionate card and letter writer, and I think it might be a generational thing, as my friends and I have recently turned 70. I think the 60s and 70s are still writing letters and cards. But, and even down to the choice of pen. At the moment I was writing something and I'm using a lovely... those very fine Pentel, Uniball pens. And I actually love handwriting. And I think getting a letter is such an exciting...
There is something very personal about a handwritten letter or card.
It's just, an email is not the same.
Yeah.
The fact that someone has gone to the trouble of sitting down and writing and put thought into it. And just listening there to the talk of primary schools, I'm a retired primary teacher, but I still do a bit of work. And they do, as that lady said, they start in junior infants. And I think great attention is paid to handwriting.
Okay, good. Because there is a text in from a listener. Children are still taught handwriting in school, and there's a strong correlation between joined writing, particularly, and reading development. My primary school niece has beautiful handwriting, and I can imagine though that it changes in secondary, says that texter. Paul has got in touch to say my 10-year-old is very proud of the fact that he is about to get his pen licence in school. Kids in his school have to use pencils when writing until such time as the teacher decides the handwriting is good enough to use a pen. Well done to him. And another texter, if you want good handwriting, it's very simple. You just use a fountain pen.
Lunchtime Live with Andrea Gilligan. Weekdays at midday
Brought to you by Active Iron.
on News Talk.